There is something very interesting happening in design right now that once you notice it, it's hard to ignore. Design is no longer just sitting in the background doing its job. It's not just about clarity, hierarchy, or making something that looks good anymore. It's starting to perform and it's starting to entertain. And whether you love the shift or feel completely overwhelmed by it, it's happening. This isn't a design is ruined conversation. It's more like we're watching the role of design expand in real time. And just like any expansion, it comes with excitement, discomfort, and experimentation, and a whole lot of questions that we don't necessarily have the answers for yet. What's interesting is no one really announced this change. It just kind of happened. One day we're designing systems and the next day we're thinking about transitions and motion, how long people would stay before scrolling away. Design didn't just stop being functional. It picked up a second job. And in this economy, haven't we all? Let's think about how we consume design now. It's not just posters, magazines, or quiet design moments anymore. Typically, in 2026, it's in short-form videos or motion ads, fast brand reveals, UI animations or interactive websites, micro interactions that feel like tiny experiences. Even logos don't just sit still anymore. They move, they react, they reshape themselves. Sometimes it feels like they have their own personality. And this didn't just happen randomly. It happened because the attention of the audience changed. And we're living in a world where attention is more valuable than currency. Not just money, not just reach. Attention first. And design just naturally adapted to that reality like it always has. This is why I love graphic design so much. It never just existed inside a vacuum. It's something that always grows and changes in response to the environment that we all live in. If people scroll faster, design moves faster. If people reward motion, surprise, design becomes more reactive. If silence gets ignored, design speaks louder. So, long story short, design learned how to move. It learned to speak differently. It learned how to entertain. And somewhere along the way, it stopped becoming something that you just look at and started becoming something that you experience, even if it's just only for a few seconds. And here's what's really interesting. Entertainment doesn't equal shallow. It's an easy assumption for people to make, especially when something is fast, loud, or visually stimulating. But some of the most technically and conceptually complex work exists in motion graphics right now. Interactive design, digital experiences. They look playful on the surface, but are deeply strategic underneath. There's a lot happening under the hood. Timing is intentional. Easing curves is intentional. Sound is intentional. How long something lingers before disappearing is intentional. So the issue isn't entertainment itself. It's what happens when entertainment becomes the only goal. Because then the question quietly shifts from does this communicate clearly to does this hold attention? And those two things aren't always aligned. Someone can hold attention through novelty without communicating anything at all. And something could communicate clearly but then get lost because it doesn't perform. This is what it's like when design lives in a feed-driven environment. And this is the frustration that a lot of designers are living today right now. You could make something that's visually stunning but doesn't tell anyone anything useful. And you can make something extremely clear and functional and well structured, but it gets instantly skipped because it doesn't have enough visual friction for a fast scrolling environment. So designers today are balancing two worlds at once. One side is clarity, function, and intention, and the other side is engagement, pacing, and spectacle. And honestly, the balance could be very exhausting because now you're suddenly making micro decisions that used to not matter so much. How quickly does this animate? Does this feel too slow, too minimal, too loud, too quiet? Will someone understand the message in 2 seconds, or will I need to grab them first? It's really a different kind of thinking, but this is where a lot of creativity is happening right now because we're designing for people who are half watching everything. Not because they don't care, but because everything is competing at the same time. Messages, notifications, videos, ads, it is all stacked together. So design adapts in fragments instead of pretending like it doesn't exist. When everything is optimized for attention, we risk designing for the algorithm. But what's more important to keep in mind is who you're designing for. What is the human experience? And algorithms by nature, they prefer extremes. They prefer fast, bold, immediately readable, emotionally reactive. They don't naturally reward nuance and restraint, or even quiet confidence in the same way. So over time, that's a subtle pressure that builds. Make it louder, make it faster, make it more engaging, make it more watchable. And that's where design could feel a little bit performative, like it's constantly trying to prove itself, constantly trying to be interesting enough that it deserves attention. And if you're a designer who's working in this space, I'm sure that you've had a moment where you pause and think, am I solving the problem in the best way or the most clickable way? Because those are two very different things usually, and the question is quite uncomfortable. But it's also a very important question to ask, because it keeps us honest in what we're actually optimizing for. Okay, but here's the good part that often gets missed. Design becoming entertainment doesn't automatically erase its depth. It actually expands it. Right now, us as designers have more tools, more mediums, more ways to connect with people emotionally, more visual paths than ever before in design history. Motion adds personality, sound adds memory, interaction, it adds intimacy. Even humor, when used thoughtfully, could break the barrier between the human and the brand. We are no longer limited to static communication. We could build things like moments, pacing. We could add feeling into systems. We could do this all in ways that we never could before. So entertainment isn't the enemy here. You can think of it just as an extension of communication. The real challenge is making sure it doesn't replace intention. Good design still has to do its job. It still has to guide, inform, support, make something easier for the audience to understand. That part doesn't go away. The surface just becomes more expressive. If anything, it becomes more important because the more layers that you add, motion, sound, personality, interaction, the more careful you have to be about not overwhelming the person who is viewing it. So restraint becomes a skill again, just like what we always talk about on this channel. Clarity becomes a flex again. Simplicity, it becomes harder to achieve, not easier. Because now there are so many ways to over-communicate without even realizing it. You have to have the discipline in knowing when to stop. There is also a shift happening with designers themselves. A lot of us are becoming hybrid creators without even planning to. Now we're part designer, part editor, part storyteller, part content creator, part strategist, thinking in timing, pacing, hooks, emotional beats, transitions even. It's not just grids, layouts, and spacing anymore. A poster isn't just a poster anymore. It might be a reel or a carousel, a motion piece, a larger narrative system. A brand identity isn't just a system of rules. These days, it's often a series of experiences that unfold over time. A UI, it isn't just functional. It's experimental, it's emotional, and increasingly behavioral. And I feel like as designers, we're all learning the language as we go. There is not really a roadmap for it yet, which is both exciting and chaotic in a very real way. At the center of everything is one thing: intention. Attention has always been the one thing that keeps design from turning into noise. You could make something entertaining and still have it be meaningful. You could design for attention without making it the only goal. You could build things that feel alive without losing clarity in the process. It takes awareness, and more awareness than ever before, honestly. Because you're not just designing what something looks like. You're designing how something behaves, how it moves, how it feels, how it competes in a digital space. There's a lot of responsibility and something that will probably only be seen for 3 seconds. So maybe the real shift isn't that design is becoming entertainment. It's that design now requires us to understand entertainment. And that comes with a lot of responsibility because entertainment is very powerful. It shapes emotion, memory, interpretation. It decides what people notice and what they skip. It influences how long they stay and what they remember after they leave. So designers are still not just making things look good. We are shaping experiences that compete in a very noisy world. And that's a lot. Sometimes it's overwhelming, but sometimes it's very creatively energizing. And sometimes it's both in the same project. But I don't think the answer is to pull back from it. I think that the answer is to stay aware inside it, to notice when we're designing for meaning versus when we're designing for reaction, to keep clarity close even when everything gets louder, to remember that design isn't becoming less serious. It's just becoming more dynamic. But at the end of the day, design has always been about communication. What is now changing is the stage that it's performing on. And now, it's a stage that never really got quiet. But okay guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. That's all I have for you today. If you did, go ahead and give it a like. Subscribe for more videos just like this because I make them every single week. And I will catch you in the next one. Bye!